Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Frankie Boyle!
Hello and welcome to New World Order. The World Cup has started. England's group is Tunisia, Panama and Belgium. And it's going to be amazing to see a country that denies women basic human rights, a country haunted by paedophile scandals and a morally bankrupt tax haven playing against Tunisia, Panama, Belgium. In America, we had this disgusting situation where children are separated from their parents on the US border. I mean, it's horrendous. They've been put in cages, sometimes 20 children to a cage, and they're sleeping under tinfoil blankets. Basically, it's a giant scratch card for paedophiles. Oh, El Salvadorian 10-year-olds. I wanted a Honduran baby. It's a disgusting joke, but it's a disgusting situation. What am I supposed to do? Pun about it? What do we do? I mean, I think our best hope is that Trump dies in office. I actually think that there's a hope of that happening. He's got so much compacted meat in his colon that when he takes a shit, it's technically an abortion. Sir Christopher Chope derailed a bill that would have banned upskirting, which seems selfish, because if he wants a picture of a cunt, he can just take a selfie. He said he didn't object to the bill, he objected to the lack of debate, because this thing needs to be debated, doesn't it? Well, that's enough about the downsides of non-consensual sex photography. Let's hear a few of the positives. Okay, let's get on with the show. Joining me tonight to discuss the week's big topics are Sarah Pascoe and Miles Jupp. Hello.
Hello.
Evening. Have you had a nice week?
No. I'm like dead inside, so usually I know the world is a terrible place and bad things are happening, you keep going on about it, but I'm quite cheerful. And then this week it got me. The children being separated from their parents, asylum seekers at the border, the audio files, and you feel so helpless, like what can any of us do? And then I remembered, send a poignant tweet. And then when everyone's like, oh, Grandma, what were you doing in the Third World War? 19 retweets. So I did my bit.
I mean, that's like a modern social attitude where people see these terrible things and they go, we need to step up the blogging.
Yeah.
I always think it's just sort of fakery, that sort of thing. I think people can use Twitter to pretend to be politically engaged that aren't at all. You know, they look at the timeline, oh, people keep mentioning this article or whatever, so they just sort of give a couple of hours, go on and put something in that seems sort of vaguely relevant, but they've got no interest in it. And then consequently, no one means any of these things. It's a completely defunct, empty tool.
Really cynical.
Is it?
Welcome to the show. You're going to enjoy that. Right. Our first motion. Democracies hate voters. Democracy comes from ancient Greece, like anal sex. Another thing we only get once every 5 years. Britain is managed in the interests of capital by having an elite class who have internalised its contradictions through attending public school in Oxbridge. Oxbridge is a compound term formed from the words obnoxious and privilege. I wonder when our politicians were last so completely divorced from the experience of the general public. If you're a modern politician and your driver takes a wrong turn through a housing estate, it must be a bit like when we drive through a safari park. Faster! That one in the tracksuit looks like he wants to shit through the sunroof. Joining us to discuss democracy, please welcome Lucy Prebble and Roisin Conate. Hello.
Hiya.
There's a lot of this in the air, isn't there? There's talk of like, were elections fixed by Putin? Was Brexit hacked by the Russians? And then with, you know, the votes in the Lords and the lack of a parliamentary vote for Brexit this week, there's a lot of talk of, you know, to what extent is Britain a democracy as well.
Democracy works based on choices, but if you're making choices of so much disinformation, you know, we've just got so much in our heads that we don't know what's true, and so it's like being drunk.
The disinformation thing, it's not an accident. I think it's like
No,
it's a really, really intentional performance that's going on. And it does come originally from Russia for the most part, or at least the people who are really, really good at disinformation are kind of the figures around Putin, who we talk a lot about Putin's KGB background, but we talk much less about the fact he surrounded himself at the Kremlin with a lot of failed theatre directors. Literally, you've got like oligarchs.
The worst people.
Oh yeah, yeah. And one of them is a guy called Surkov, who is basically the sort of Peter Mandelson, shadowy right-hand man of Putin, and he is a failed theatre director, and he has kind of been an architect of the performance of democracy, which is something we're seeing quite a lot of in America here now, which is the idea that, you know, we host an election, but it's sort of a play of an election, and then we're all going to choose to suspend our disbelief, basically. And it comes from this theatre director idea. He's also the mastermind of disinformation, the idea that basically confuse everybody massively so they don't know what's going on, and then they just give up out of despair, which is how a lot of theatre works.
It's just about the amount of information that's out there now. So when the Greeks invented democracy, there was just less stuff to know and worry about. It was sort of like, okay, this year we're going to have a vote on shall we start dressing for athletics? No. Do we still hate the Persians? Yes. You know, it was just similar. Now there's so many different things. You think, well, what is this? The idea that there's so much going on. Am I really represented by anyone?
Well, there's also this case, though, isn't there, that we do all this stuff. So we've got GCHQ, we've got massive intelligence services. America complaining about its elections being hacked. I mean, almost American foreign policy, to some extent, is to influence other people's elections. And, you know, so the idea of them criticising Russia for meddling in elections is a bit like, you know, Ant McPartlin criticising your parallel parking or something. Obviously, Russia do this, but, like, don't all countries do this to some extent?
Putin's got a secret wife.
What?
I mean, never trust a man with a secret wife. I mean, it's like...
He also has a poodle as well, by the way. But he hides it because the Kremlin have told him that it doesn't look manly.
I think democracy is the best system we've got. It's not ideal, but any country that doesn't have it, even though it might be safer, you know, those pseudo-safe, there's very low crime rate, but yeah, no one's laughing either, mate. Do you know what I mean? So I'm like, I still think it's the best we've got. We need to sort of fix it up a bit.
Do you want people to feel safe or amused?
Amused. Always amused. What's the point of being safe and sad?
First up, many people believe that democracy is under threat from foreign interference. Russia specifically has been accused of meddling with the American elections and helping Trump's campaign. Here's Putin resolutely denying any involvement in US politics during an intense public exchange with Megyn Kelly.
What the experts say is that this couldn't have been faked, that it's not one factor, that it's 100 factors that point to Russia. They say it's the forensics, it's the digital fingerprints, it's the IP addresses, the malware, the encryption keys, the specific pieces of code, that all of them point to Russia, and none of them points to anyone other than Russia.
Какие отпечатки пальцев? Отпечатки копыт, скажите, рогов, чьи эти отпечатки? Значит, IP-адреса, их можно вообще придумать. Знаете, сколько много специалистов? Они сделают так, что это с вашего адреса, с домашнего. Дети ваши послали, младший ваш ребенок 3-летнего возраста. А проблема не в нас. Проблема внутри американской политики. Вот в чем проблема. Команда Трампа оказалась более эффективной в ходе избирательной кампании. Я и сам иногда думаю, ну, перебирает мужик, честное слово. Это правда. Но оказалось, что он был прав, а мы хорошие. Это вообще мне антисемитизм напоминает. Во всем евреи виноваты, понимаете? Сам придурок так ничего сделать не может, евреи виноваты. Но мы знаем, что к чему приводят такие настроения. Ничем хорошим они не заканчивают.
I like him better now I know he's got a secret piddle.
What about his secret wife? She has to walk it.
The significance of, like, okay, I don't need that anymore.
Well,
Yeah.
that was like Luke Skywalker on the Death Star. It's like, here we go.
That Eminem is getting him sacked up.
It's a very clever thing he does there, which is she gives him a digital fingerprint, which is a tangible thing that you can measure, and then he does that thing which is talking to a room full of like bloated 60-year-old oligarchs going like, oh, fingerprints, like it's a fact.
I don't know if you've ever gone out with someone who's a pathological liar, because I have. And it's very, very difficult to prove, because they tell you you're mad.
Yeah.
It's about gaslighting, and you go, but you were there, and you go, I wasn't.
Yeah.
I wasn't there, and you can't trust any reality. And that's such a good example of someone using that tactic. Because I was watching it going, yeah, but obviously they can fit anything on a computer. Of course it can be faked.
I'm not sure, because I don't watch that and feel that he's gaslighting. I think there's something else going on, and I think the laughter is a really interesting thing.
Really
you see it with Trump as well.
Yeah.
There's a Russian word called psyop, and it's the idea that what you do is you sort of pretend to be something that everyone knows that you're not. And it's a really, really big sort of humour in Russia. And basically it's this idea that you all know that I don't really mean what I'm saying. We all understand that. We're all part of a gang, that it's part of a game that understands that I did murder that person.
Yeah.
And that actually it's become this really global, cynical performance. I think they're laughing because they know he's lying, and he knows they know he's lying, and we're all in a gang.
Well, I sort of think his publicity's a bit like that. So all that stuff where he's riding, like, with his top off on horseback. You know, he always looks like he's doing a Duke of Edinburgh award or something. It's kind of deliberately cartoonish.
My mum fancies him. That's how bad...
I don't not.
Oh, don't do this again.
I can't help it, it's a condition. And when he said, trust me, we're the good guys, I was like, yeah, I know he's a bad guy. I think he's...
You're the problem with democracy.
I know. I did Google, is Putin single?
Next up, 16-year-olds were allowed to vote in the Scottish referendum. Some have suggested that the voting age should be lowered in general elections to 16. But what do teenagers make of the proposals? Here are two students giving a very honest response.
Bad. Good thing. Bad. I'm 16. Bad thing. Why do you think it's a bad thing? Because no, 16. Do you think people are mature enough for 16 to vote? Yeah.
Can't wait for life to wipe the smile off their faces.
Joy isn't necessarily immature.
Yeah, they should be in charge.
They should.
Yeah.
I don't know, I think young people should be rebelling, though. I remember, like, in the Scottish referendum, so they had, like, a kind of question time in a venue for teenagers. And, like, George Galloway and Nicola Sturgeon and people like that are on, and the teenagers are all asking questions. You're like, you should be at home writing a song about how you want to take a shit in George Galloway's mouth. You should be rebelling against this whole
There's too
thing.
many of those songs, Frankie.
Too much singing, not enough action.
Right, last year there was only one conviction for election fraud in the whole UK. Despite that, the government has begun trialling voter ID. Here's how one local authority advertised the trial with a friendly and casual exchange.
So, who are you voting for in the local elections in May?
I'm not telling you, that's between me and the ballot box.
Well, whatever you do, make sure you take your ID with you.
Oh, so what's that all about then?
Bromley is taking part in a pilot to test asking people to bring ID to the polling station in order to vote.
But what if you haven't got any sort of ID at all?
You can apply for a postal vote, or you can get a certificate of ID from the council.
Right, so no ID, no vote. I'll make a note.
It's good to know that the London Borough of Bromley is doing all it can to prevent voting fraud.
Well, they get my vote, and I'm off to check the website now.
I've got quite a few other websites to get through first. Couldn't they just cross-reference it with the sex offenders register?
It makes you realise that acting at the beginning of pornographies is actually quite good.
It was like the chat when you had a one-night stand and you're waiting for someone to Uber to come. She's going to vote.
There's a bit in there where he said you can get a certificate of ID.
Yeah.
Well, what ID do you need to pick that up then?
Yeah, that's the whole in the system.
Those two people, they both looked like that was the longest conversation they had ever been in. They hadn't yet turned racist.
Isn't it also based on just a false premise, this idea that loads and loads of people, that voter fraud is this massive problem that we have to counter with ID? I don't believe that is the case. The way that votes are being affected and that fraud is happening, it's not Putin in a queue wearing a wig with my electricity bill. It's some very, very subtle machinations that are going on, and the idea that that's a problem that needs to be solved is nonsense.
Well, everywhere apart from in Bromley,
Oh, well,
where the whole situation's out of control.
Okay, the the House of Commons is sometimes accused of being little more than a rowdy school playground. Here's two very different takes on how MPs behave in Parliament from a behind-the-scenes documentary.
Sarah Champion, the Labour MP for Rotherham, cuts a rather different figure from the old boys of the Commons.
The behaviour in there is just disgusting. I mean, really embarrassingly juvenile, screaming, and the fact that, you know, it's men in their 50s and 60s doing it, it's just distasteful.
Prime Minister's Questions is the theatre of politics. And that's quite right. It can't all be done in dusty committee rooms. When important issues are being discussed, where you think your opponents are wrong and what they would do would be damaging to the nation's interest, you have to do it with some passion and some verve.
You don't fancy him, do you?
No. He's one step too far. Probably means he's a good guy.
It's kind of like a Punch cartoon of the first giraffe in England or something. There's something very inhuman about him. And again, you know, it's like the thing with Putin, where we go, well, if these people are cartoons and they're not trying to relate to us as people and connect in that way, then they know the system isn't real. They know they're kind of pulling levers and, as he says, acting out a theatre.
So is he Stoyle? Who's it called?
Yes, Style.
Is he Style? But is that the same thing?
Oh, very much so.
It's
like
not...
him and Boris Johnson are very much, I think, engaged in this thing of, you understand I'm playing a character, and you understand that, you know, basically my personality is like a, you know, a scar tissue I've grown over the wound of myself, and we all just